All is well. The day will come when, after we have, as a community, as a spiritual community, centered ourselves in the awareness of spirit, we will just sit in quietude and in silence and enjoy the company of spirit in and through and by means of each other, because it's the best way of really feeling that we are in a state of grace. And so, my dear ones, now, as I came out this morning, I wondered, what is it? What is it, beloved presence, that you want us to focus on today? What is it you want to hear? What is the message? What is the word? And that's what I always do before I, come out into the sanctuary. And it's not that I haven't prepared. I've always prepared something. And sometimes it goes according to what I have prepared, and of course sometimes it doesn't. It becomes something entirely different. But as I was coming out, this little book kind of fell at me. It's called Treat Yourself to Life by Raymond Charles Barker. And as we approach the wonderful celebration of Easter, which is the celebration of life rising, expanding, growing, becoming more of itself by means of all of its creation, and especially by means of you and me. The page that opened was actually the first page in the book, and it reads, Treat yourself to happiness is the chapter. Will I ever be happy again? Begins with a question. Is the cry which comes from the hearts of thousands every day. For 50 years I have been talking with many hundreds of these people and have proved to them that their happiness can be regained and expanded if they follow a few simple rules. "60, 70 years ago, and definitely 50 years ago, the world was introduced to a concept that had never been introduced to the world before, and this is brought out very clearly in Caroline Myss's work too, in her book on the entering of the castle, that at that time the world was given a full-on look at the thought and the reality that my life is my responsibility. I am in charge of my life, and I am the creator of all of its experiences. Prior to this, it was called a new thought, but hadn't been picked up. But about 50 years ago, it began to be picked up really seriously. But it's a concept that had never been shared with across the board or come into, being part of status quo as it is now. And so it's important for us to understand that awesome power that we possess, but only when we're in co-creation, cooperation with the source of our being, the creator of all of our good, the provider of our lives, wonderful good. The source itself, the creator of our being and the creator of all that is. And whatever your name, your favorite name is for that power, that presence, that energy, that consciousness, that dynamic, that force that is indescribable and we cannot ever fully understand because we're finite and it's infinite. And all of religious science is based on that concept. This is the science of self-responsibility in a nutshell. That's what it is. The science of self-responsibility. Now, you might think that once the world got an inkling with regard to how wonderful it is to have the key and the answer after all, Well, yeah, that's the initial kick of excitement. But once you begin to study it and then endeavor to apply the study, you realize, oh my God, this is hard. This is hard. This is work. And a lot of it's not very pleasant at all. And it means I have to face myself down every time I have a choice to make, and I'm on the verge of making the negative one rather than the affirmative one. And then when I make the negative one, I have to address myself. And I have to decide the wisdom I'm going to gain from that or not. Or I might decide to ignore it and make the same mistake again and again and again. But this is hard, hard work. But it gives us great satisfaction. I don't know about you, but whenever I roll up my sleeves and get into something that's really a hard endeavor, and once I've done it and I've completed it, I can't tell you the good feeling that is. The sense of accomplishment, the sense of achievement, the sense of progress, the sense of advancement, the sense of something deepening and making a huge difference in my life. The easy, mindless things that don't move me much at all anyway. That's done. Yeah, it's good. It's great. Yeah. But it doesn't deepen me the way accomplishing something that we call in human terms hard. People, they put aside hard because it's hard. Well, hard only means hard. It doesn't mean it's not impossible. It's just hard. But they put it aside as though it were impossible because it's hard. And don't even give it a shot. And so, with regard to happiness, we have a great investment in our own happiness. He said, for 50 years I've been talking to people like this. And here's what I've concluded. Whatever you are, or wherever you are, whether it's in an apartment in New York, which is where he was at the time, or San Francisco, a farm in Iowa, a house in Texas, or a bungalow in Florida, there is an inner you which is craving love, self-expression, permanence in your health, and security in money. Everybody's worried about those things to some degree or another. And he says, if not actually fearful of the future, you are at least suffering mild anxiety, the #1 mental symptom of the century. It was last century when he was talking about this. Mild anxiety. All of us suffering mild anxiety, at least, if not chronic anxiety, at the other end of that spectrum. About something that hasn't happened yet anyway. And he gives an example of this lady, Elizabeth Andrews. She was in a great city hospital in New York, confined to bed. And he went to visit her, and she said, I have just been told by the doctors that I have Paget's disease, a malignant disease, and that I will never walk again without heavy braces and crutches. I don't want to accept this verdict, need I? Knowing that this woman was capable of making drastic changes in her thinking and feeling, I answered. Key there was knowing that the woman was capable of making drastic changes in her thinking and feeling, I answered. While the factual evidence of bone disease is true, you need to believe it is not permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent. You can treat yourself out of this, and I know it can be done. 8 months later, without a brace or a crutch, Elizabeth Andrews walked into her church on a Sunday morning and joined others in the acknowledgement of a power which knows no such thing as incurability. Now, drastic changes were necessary in the way that she was thinking in order for this to happen. Drastic change does not come easily when we are habituated into thinking in a different way. But see, it's hard, but it's doable. It's doable. How could this happen? Well, life limits no one, offers itself freely to all. If you can accept this new viewpoint, as Elizabeth did, you can treat yourself to greater living. Elizabeth had learned that what an individual with his material science could not do for her, creative thinking could, provided she directed it herself. You need great spiritual stamina to be able to do this. You will not have great spiritual stamina to do this if you do not have a great and deep relationship with your source. Because how can you trust what you do not know? That's iffy at best. That's why we're in spiritual practice. That's why we're in spiritual community that supports our spiritual practice and helps us to sustain it. Standing at her bedside on the day of her sentence to a life of invalidism, I saw her faint hope that I would agree she would walk again. Knowing her sincerity and her capacity in the past to control her thinking, I immediately said, "You certainly can walk again, and I will help you every step of the way." Every day for months, she and I knew certain basic truths together. She in her hospital bed and I in my home or office. Replaced in her subconsciousness the verdict of an incurable disease with a sure knowledge of a woman walking through life with ease. And it doesn't stop there. After a long time, she fell. It was icy, it was freezing in New York, and they thought she slipped. But when they took her into the hospital, they said, no, the disease is back. And that's why you broke your leg. So, having done it once before, she knew she could do it again. So again, entered into that awareness. I am not my body, and my body is not the boss of me. And that there's something more powerful than the body working in cooperation with me in order to appease the body, assist the body, and help the body to heal. And so, she goes through the same spiritual process, and again having the doctors pronounce to her that she would not be able to survive without being with calipers and God knows what not. Several months later, again she marches in to her church, all being well. And that's where we lose faith sometimes, when we have had a healing and it returns. And we say, oh gosh, it didn't work. Well, it did work. But we just have to amp up that faith in something greater than ourselves, being present within ourselves with the capacity and with the ability to be a healing factor when we need it to be a healing factor. But for that to happen, I have to be so poised, I can't tell you. Poised, calm, calm, not anxious, trusting, calm, surrendered to the power and the presence of Spirit that can work through me in whatever way I know it can work through me. And that's our challenge. And he says here, for a single moment, the news terrified her. Tears came to her eyes and panic clutched her heart. But she instantly turned in thought to her greater faith in God and affirmed that the creative power was equal to this situation. And then the calm came, the faith returned, and the demonstration happened. She knew that life would respond to her as she responded to it. Life will always come into agreement with you and me with regard to the decisions that we make. Life will agree with you because the law of life responds to you by corresponding to what you have decided. Darn it, sometimes that's not good. When we forget ourselves and decide for the condition instead of the healing. When do we get our healing? Ernest Holmes says, when your faith in your healing becomes stronger than your faith in the condition, you get your healing. That's why all those healthy centenarians say, we will not engage with anybody, young, old, or otherwise, who are constantly into organ recitals. My poor hip, my damn knee, whatever. Because life is going to correspond to that and make sure that you have a damn knee and a poor hip. Because that's what your focus and energy is on. And what fascinates you is what we express and what we experience. It's as simple and as difficult as that. Now that, it sounds easy, but easy, easy it's not. Simple, yes, but easy it's not. And her response the second time was, we'll fool them yet, won't we? And my agreement with her faith was instantaneous. Where is your mind? That's always the question you have to ask yourself, and I do too. Where is your mind just now? What have you been thinking? How many times did your mother say to you when you were a child, what were you thinking, child? So the onus is on you and the onus is on me to stand in responsibility and in authority for our own lives. And not be allowing this, that, and the other out there. Tom, Dick, Sheila, Mary, Penelope, Harry, that thing, to dictate how we're going to think and how we're going to feel and what's going to happen in our lives. Says who? Says you. It's the only one who says what's going to happen in your life. Okay, he says, your future is self-determined. You may not believe this, but it is true. I have spent 50 years listening to people who tried to convince me how sick they were, how poor and unhappy they were, how unappreciated they were, how not included they were, how disappointed they were, how not invited they were. Always they have declared that the cause of their problem came from sources outside themselves. It is easier to blame the weather for your cold than it is to realize that your unconscious anger has produced it. Oh my goodness, who wants to be told that? When you come in sneezing and snorting, if somebody says to you, well, why are you so angry? Stop it, and you'll get better. It's not what we want to hear, and it's not what we're going to say to each other either. We're going to say, take care of yourself now. But I do say to people, okay, what was going on in your mind? You know, if it's just a common cold, I usually say to myself or others, about 2 weeks ago or so, what was going on in your life? What was happening? What was the mood? What was the climate like? What was, well, you know, where were your feelings? Where was your thinking? Because that might be part of why you're congested now, you're snuffed up now, you're stuffed up now, whatever. You know, we all know by now that many of our discomforts and illnesses and diseases and so on is psychosomatic. It's body-mind, the connection. You can't detach the body from the mind or the mind from the body. And so it's up to you and to me to be able to make the most of whatever situation comes our way. But here's the thing about it all. Not to be disturbed by a cough or a cold or a chill or a flu or whatever it is that's going on. It's going on in everybody's life. Everybody has challenges. Not one of us gets out of here without being challenged. And the thing is not to be fussed over it, not to be disturbed by it, not to be disappointed as a result of it, not to go into the doldrums as a result of it. But to say, isn't this interesting? I wasn't expecting this, kind of got sideswiped by this one. All right then, let's see what we can do with it. Let's see what we can do with this. Let's respond to it. Let's respond to it in a way that gets me out of it and not deeper into it, because I know I can. This is just something that has come along in service to me. When did you last think about an ailment like that? This has come to me in service to me for something for me to clarify, get cleared in my life, and to learn from. So you receive it, you know. You don't resist. Resist not evil, we are told. And evil in this is anything unlike that which is light, that which is truth, that which is goodness, that which is wholeness, that which is wellness. Anything unlike that, or not to resist it, or to look at it and be okay with it and not be afraid of it, and allow it to be for the time that it's going to be, and learn that it doesn't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent at all. It's a temporary visitation, and unless you make it permanent, it doesn't have to be permanent. Unless you agree with it and let it have its way with you, it doesn't have to remain. But you know, some of the greatest saints suffered dreadfully, all kinds of physical ailments, for whatever their reasons were. However, I will add, that is not a necessary part of growth and development spiritually. You have to understand that in the time of the fantastic and great, extraordinary mystics, the whole theology was based on a suffering Savior. A suffering Savior. And until very recently that was so. Now we're opening wider to understanding that our focus is to be on the living, risen Christ, the glorious, living, risen Christ. There's no suffering in that at all. No physical suffering in that at all. So now our focus is on, you know, being the best that we can be, being as well as we can be, being as whole as we can be, and being as full as we can be, and complete as we can be. But in the past, these wonderful saints and sages and mystics prayed for suffering. Of course, as you think it, so it is. They invited suffering. They wanted the wounds of Jesus, they wanted the suffering of Jesus, and they got it. Because they wanted it, and they were fixated on it. And through it, they grew deeply into a deep, intimate relationship with their source. And they were transformed beyond reason and logic into that beautiful state of consciousness But you and I don't have to do it that way. It's not necessary to do it that way. Will you and I suffer? Yes, we will. Some way or another. But only because of our mistaken notions about things, and only because of our non-recognition that we have charge of our own consciousness and our own minds, and consequently our own lives. The mistakes we make are more through ignorance than anything else. And the misunderstanding and non-understanding of what it is to know that there is a powerful good in the universe greater than I am and everything is. And I get to use it. I'm privileged to use it for good, for good. It's like Rumi says, beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, reason and logic, duality, there is a field. I'll meet you there. It's the only place I can meet you. You in your essence, you in your soul. Your soul and my soul can only meet in that field and nowhere else. So I have to go beyond duality, beyond the mind with its logic and its reason that gets fixed in me. That's not my logic and reason anyway, it's all imported. Into that state of conscious consciousness where there is no duality, there's no right and wrong. It cannot be where there's non-duality, because where there's non-duality, there's only the one thing, and it's whole, unified, harmonized, integrated, singular, one. And let me tell you, any little endeavor that you're engaged in, any effort that you are making to move your mind out of the way so that you can get to your soul and rest in your soul and bathe in your soul and enjoy your soul is well worth the effort. It truly is well worth the effort. But understand this, and it can be a hardship. You are few, very few. Most people, most of the time, do not want to go to that level for all kinds of reasons. They may be scared and frightened, or they may be as selfish as all get up, and all in between. You are the few, and it can be lonely, and that's why, the great Saint Teresa says we need spiritual companions along the way, so that in our aloneness, because it can feel very alone if you're the only one that's thinking like this, feeling like this, in a group that's absolutely not and thinks you're a little, ooh. It can be challenging, and that is why she says, get yourself some spiritual companions who will support you in realizing your beauty, your grace, your light, your poise, your giftedness, your blessing, so that you can be all of that in the world and make the difference, which is why we're all here. Of course, as soon as we arrive, we forget. Then we have to, work our way back into, remembrance again. So that is why it's always a great joy to me to come into a room like this where there are people who show up so that they can get to know themselves and honor themselves and respect themselves and love themselves enough to do the healing work that is necessary, to do the forgiveness work that is necessary in order to be the brightest light that we can be on this plane. Now understand this. Forgiveness is a very necessary part of any kind of healing. It is not an option. Forgiveness is a law, the law of forgiveness. It's not an option if you want to regain yourself with a capital S. And that in itself is a lifetime's work. Hard enough. But if it is your intention, and you sow the seed of your intention, and you call upon the power and you call upon the presence of the source that lives and moves and has its being within you, it is very doable. And oh my goodness, the relief, the sense of lightness when that burden has been lifted off our shoulders. The burden of unforgiveness is so weighty. You don't realize it until it's gone. Until it's gone, you don't realize what a weight it has been. And it's that constant cloud over your head that keeps us in discontent no matter how good life is. Happiness is your responsibility. It's my responsibility. And as I share with you from time to time, as one of my teachers told me, and when that was spoken, I got it instantly. Happiness is not the result of any one thing, person, place, thing, event. Happiness is the result of the choices you make in every single now moment. It's a choice. And that's where it begins. A choice that you make within yourself, and you decide, I am responsible for my joy. I am responsible for my happiness. And I take that responsibility seriously. And no one has the power to take from me my joy, my happiness, unless I give them the power to do so. Whether it's a person or a place and a thing, I have to give power to that person, place, or thing in order for me to deplete myself of a sense of joy and happiness or well-being or whatever. And what's going to stop me from doing that? My opinions, my thoughts, my fixed ideas about it, them, they, you should be in my regard. How could they not have invited me? I'm shattered. There goes my day. I'm miserable. How could they not have invited me? And then all the mental anguish around trying to figure out why you weren't invited. And then all the stories that crop up in your head. Oh, she must have something against me. Oh, he doesn't like me. Maybe the invitation got lost in the mail. Maybe she's not giving you a second thought and has nothing of animosity in them in your regard. All but your head and your mind and the committee that's yapping at you is telling you all kinds of horrific stories. See, that's the kind of thing that keeps us stopped and blocked, and it's the kind of thing that's very common that goes on in every mind on this planet to some degree or another, all of the time. So I leave you with the understanding that if you want to be happy, monitor your thoughts, mind your mind, because your thoughts will create your feelings, and your thoughts and feelings together will create your behaviors. So, monitor the mind. I wish we could have some little monitors the way these days you have baby monitors that you can put in their rooms and see everything that's going on. Give you a prod or something, you know? When you go into the negative zone, it goes like Caesar does with the dogs. Stop that. Stop that. You come up with one for yourself. Come up for a little formula for yourself, some little thing that wakes you up from the mesmerization of negative thinking that all are habituated into, without exception, to some degree or another. So what are you going to do with yourselves, you light beings, today? How How are you going to be, you light beings, today? Are you going to be light beings today? Rhetorical questions. And I'm included in the question. How are we going to be today? What will we be vibing to today? What are we going to get on down with today? I tell you, if we're doing this, we're on the right side of life. If we're dragging, we need to take a rain check. Love rain checks, don't you? Rain checks are available to us so that we can use them. Use them. So, we will finish today the way we always finish, and that's with our little reciprocity ritual. The giving and the receiving from life. That's all this is, the giving and receiving of life. And so let's take our gift between our amazing hands. And let's bless our gifts and say, Divine love consecrates my gift. It really does go forward to heal, to bless, and to prosper. All those who give and all those who receive. I rejoice in the sharing of my good. And I release my gift with love. So it is. And so, my dear ones, does anyone have a question? All right then, what I'm going to recommend to you all is, from now until Easter, not many days left, next week is Easter week, to make the promise to yourself, and I will too, to be as affirmative as all get up as I possibly can be every day until Easter. I'm going to get out there as you are and be so affirming that that light is going to radiate everywhere. Can we do that, do you think? Let's promise ourselves. And remember, don't ever make a promise to yourself if you're not going to keep it. It's the one way that whittles away at your self-esteem if you keep breaking the promises you make to yourself. That way you learn not to trust yourself and that your word means nothing. So be very, very slow to make promises to yourself or anybody else. So we've made this promise now to be radiating affirmatively every day, at least until Easter.